Hola and aloha, my friends. Welcome back to the Surfer's Library. I'm Billy Jack, your guide through the pages of surf history, culture, and legend. Today we're diving back into Women on Waves, a cultural history of surfing, from ancient goddesses and Hawaiian queens to Malibu movie stars and millennial champions by Jim Kempton. You know, when I was first talking to the author about reading from his book, I asked him what he suggested I read after the first chapter, and he suggested Chapter 6, Hollywood Malibu Magic, due to the fact that a lot of these stories are ones that not a lot of people know these days, even people like me that read everything they can about surfing. And he was right. This chapter is where the story shifts into the early 20th century, a time when surfing was evolving, spreading, and finding new life beyond Hawaii. But even as the sport changed, women were right there in the lineup, helping shape its future in ways that often go overlooked. In this chapter, we'll meet another group of remarkable water women who kept the presence of women strong in the ocean during a pivotal moment in surf history. Their stories connect the ancient traditions of Hawaiian surf culture to the modern era, bridging gaps that surf media hasn't always shown. So settle in, maybe close your eyes and picture the early days of surfing. Heavy boards, uncrowded waves, and bonfires on the beach. Let's turn the page and paddle out. Hollywood Malibu Magic. Marilyn Monroe rides the wild surf, a pack of feisty females claim Malibu, and a surfboard made for a film starlet starts a design revolution. 1945 to 1958. I have learned over the years that when one's mind is made up, this diminishes fear. Knowing what must be done does away with fear. Rosa Parks. Cashing in the Malibu chip. Les Williams was in a hurry, rushing to catch some late afternoon waves at Malibu. He had skipped the last hour of work to add time to his surf session. Arriving in the parking lot, he could see the swell running across the cobbled beach and the light wind catching the face. As he leapt out of his car, he suddenly realized he had forgotten the one thing he needed most, his surfboard. He knew most of the surfers would already be out in the water, but as he hustled onto the sand, his eye caught Darrylin Zanuck sitting at first point with her board in tow. Williams knew her surfboard was a smaller balsa board built for a girl, but he was desperate. Cajoling Darrylin into letting him borrow it, he paddled out into the lineup. The very first ride was a revelation. "I'd never experienced anything like the sensation it produced," Williams told me in an interview in 2004. "It was so light, so responsive, it was like riding a magic carpet. Before the session was over, I was running circles around the rest of the crew." His first reaction was to stride onto the beach and demand why Darrylin had never let him ride this miracle before. "It's a girl board," she replied. "You never asked." Williams went straight to shaper Joe Quigg and asked to try one. Quigg had just finished a board for his girlfriend and soon-to-be wife Agnes. Both he and Matt Kivlin, the two preeminent Malibu shapers of the era, had been shaping lighter, shorter boards for their girlfriends for some time. Darrylin Zanuck, who had stolen actor and surfer Tommy Zahn away from Marilyn Monroe, surfed regularly at Malibu. At Zahn's request, Joe Quigg created a surfboard for her. Traditional design called for a redwood balsa plank, heavy and unmaneuverable. Quigg fashioned a balsa board covered in fiberglass and resin. Shorter, lighter, and equally important, it fit in the back of Miss Zanuck's chic Chrysler convertible. She was really the first girl to buy a surfboard and buy a convertible and stick the surfboard in the back and drive up to Malibu and drive up and down the coast and learn to surf, Quigg recalled. He dubbed the board the Easy Rider, but it has gone down in history as the Darrylin. Williams claimed to be the first to discover the inherent properties that made these boards perform, but it didn't take long for the secret to be uncovered. Suddenly, the boards that were being built for the female surfers were being borrowed, and the girls found it tougher and tougher to get their own boards back. The Malibu Chip, a board that revolutionized surfing, had been launched. "That board," commented master board builder Joe Quigg, "busted the whole surfing thing wide open." That unique shape allowed for bottom and top turns that held closer to the curl. The surfer was where he or she needed to be in the wave. The performance properties of shortboards that transformed the sport were discovered when men tried riding boards shaped for women. Inadvertently, women had requested an innovation that became one of the most important design developments in the history of wave riding equipment. The Actors Studio. As an early epicenter of surfing, Malibu, with its perfect, gentle peeling waves and beautiful shoreline, was a magnet for surfers, actors, dreamers, and occasionally desperados. Proximity to an urban metropolis and Hollywood's filmmaking industry, Malibu's secluded location quickly became a haven for the surfing set and the movie crowd. The heady mix of bohemian freedom and media-soaked fantasy provided a gathering spot close enough to Hollywood for actors to drive to work. For those who wanted to surf, it was the perfect actors studio. Television actor James Arness of Gunsmoke fame, Hemingway's screenwriter Peter Vertel, and even Marilyn Monroe, when she was still Norma Jean Baker, were regulars in the surf. Mary Ann Hawkins, 40s surfing superstar, now earning frequent roles as a stuntwoman, moved to Malibu to be near her work. "I used to surf with Peter Lawford, Debbie Reynolds, and Robin Grigg," Hawkins' daughter Kathy remembered. "They were my babysitters on the beach while my mom was working in Hollywood." The rest of the nation was not as idyllic as Malibu. In Montgomery, Alabama, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on the bus to a white man. Interracial couple Richard and Mildred Loving had to marry secretly, breaking Virginia's racial laws. Racism and misogyny were only marginally better in California. Los Angeles had an after-dark curfew for black people in white neighborhoods. Hollywood film and recording studios employed the casting couch, a blatant form of male power abuse, the cover charge for entrance into the entertainment business. Nonetheless, actresses and vocalists offered hope by portraying strong roles or singing about them. Hard experience only encouraged more determined efforts to attain dreams that were now substantially more visible. Actress Lucille Ball created and starred in I Love Lucy, a revolutionary television comedy that was the #1 series from 1951 to 1957. The first woman entertainer to co-own her own show's production company with her husband, she created the template that all sitcoms continued to follow. In films like The African Queen, Kate Hepburn depicted a strong, unshakable woman whose strength and dignity powered the most popular movie of the era. And in music, a sultry, self-confident Peggy Lee, the most independent woman in the music business, sang her most famous tune, Fever. For the daring few women discovering wave riding, it would soon correlate to surf fever. In a society still stilted with an almost complete male dominance, the surfing culture afforded females more options than most. Women surfers from Maui to Malibu showed their athletic prowess and remarkable free spirit while demanding surfboards whose design, when discovered by men, ended up revolutionizing the surfing world. The women of Malibu in the ferment of mid-century America. Surfer girls lead the charge. Kathy Gidget Kohner is the most famous of the women of Malibu, but she was not the most experienced surfer nor the first. Darrylin Zanuck, the daughter of Hollywood film mogul Darryl F. Zanuck, was one. Her boyfriend at the time, Tommy Zahn, an actor, well-known surfer, and all-around waterman, had asked Malibu shaper Joe Quigg to build a board for her. This shorter, lighter balsa board was adopted by a squadron of women to progress rapidly, driving performance at an unexpected pace. In the late 40s, this crew included Robin Grigg, Aggie Bane, Vickie Flaxman, and Claire Cassidy. Robin Grigg remembered her first trip to Malibu in the late 40s. A little gremmy sneaking through a hole in the fence at the Ringe estate. She often received rides to the beach from young struggling actor Peter Lawford, who was part of the small crew at Malibu. Tommy Zahn took her under his wing and introduced her to Joe Quigg, who built her a board, a 60-pound, 10-foot squaretail that she and Aggie Bane both rode. Grigg and Aggie Bane had been friends since 6th grade in Sunday school. They had both spent their summers at the beach, swimming, prone paddling, and surfing. During the winter of 1950, Aggie met Joe Quigg, fell in love, and married soon after. Joe and Aggie enjoyed taking road trips together, selling newly made girl boards up and down the coast. Shortly thereafter, Quigg also fashioned a similar board for Vickie Flaxman, perhaps the most talented Malibu surf girl of the 50s. This 9-foot, 6-inch board was so light and responsive that by the end of the summer, Vickie was surfing, Quigg acknowledged, better than most of the men. Flaxman, perhaps the most competitive of the crew, started surfing in earnest during the summer of 1950. Tall and muscular, with an athlete's poise, she hoisted her board and carved turns in the water with equal grace. Wanting to prove their skill in the water, she coaxed her friend Aggie Bane into racing the lifeguards' paddleboards for such a distance that the girls returned to the beach with the inside of their upper arms scratched and bleeding from the workout. Claire Cassidy, described by the others as the sweetest of the bunch, played ukulele and organized a women's surf club, He'inelu, going surfing in Hawaiian. Gregarious yet nonchalant, she apparently was wholly unfazed by the male surfers and their advances. She was, Joe Quigg observed, the original independent woman surfer. Although a small group, these women had an effect on the progression of women's surfing far greater than first realized. As a result of having these new type Malibu boards, explained Jeff Duclos in his definitive article on Malibu women surfers of the time, Vickie Flaxman and Aggie Bane represented the counterculture at Malibu, riding alongside He-Man on custom, trimmed-down balsa boards designed by Aggie's boyfriend and future husband, Joe Quigg. Historian and surfer editor Sam George contended that it was the use of these ladies' lightweight boards by Quigg and Les Williams that is credited with sparking the entire movement toward shorter, lighter surfboards. Joe Quigg agreed. That's what helped Vickie look better than most men out there, because they, the girls, got those boards first. And they, the men, were jealous. A lot of people don't want to admit that, but a lot of big-name Malibu guys did not like women out there looking that good. The guys at Malibu were really nice to us, with the exception of Simmons, of course, and Buzzy Trent, Vickie Flaxman attested. When we first learned, there were only 2 breaks at Malibu. There was a mid-break and there was the point. We learned at mid-break, and the guys would let us in the waves, except for Simmons, who would never let any girl in a wave, and Buzzy Trent, who wasn't very nice about it either. The lighter, shorter boards the girls rode met with skepticism from other areas of California, and in some cases produced outright derision. The Malibu crew was intent on proving the validity of the design, and of their female contingent as well. On a trip to Baja, they stopped in the upscale San Diego suburb of La Jolla to attend the Wind and Sea Surf Club's annual Luau celebration. As surfing's elite from all over California gathered for the festivities, the Malibu crew saw their chance. Surf historian and Los Angeles culture doyen Craig Stesick accounted in the Surfer's Journal, "The Malibu elders sense vindication is at hand. Vickie Flaxman is taken aside and told that she will become the first mainland female to surf outside Wind and Sea. Everybody was dazzled because we had these balsa boards," Vickie Flaxman remembered. "It was nearly 10 feet. The biggest waves I'd seen at Malibu were maybe 6 to 8 feet. It was breaking way outside and I wasn't anxious to go out there. But the guys talked me into it. They kept telling me I had to go out there and take off from the point. No girl's ever done it, they said. So I said, okay, if you guys don't take off and don't leave me out there by myself." But once out in the lineup, her compatriots vanished. Flaxman found herself out in the 10-foot faces on her own. Her first wave results in a hideous wipeout in a long swim, Stesick wrote. Pummeled and tired, Flaxman was ready to quit. I said, "That's it, I'm done," she acknowledged. But they insisted I go back out. On her next wave, Flaxman takes off far outside and adroitly maneuvers all the way to the beach, where she gingerly steps off onto the sand, Stesick recounted in the Surfer's Journal. The entire beach crowd breaks into applause upon Vickie's dismount, Stesick concluded. History had been made and a point had been proven. Personifying the strong, independent woman of the 50s, these surfers lived the life that would soon be exposed to the world. As important as it was, the era was short-lived. We all had other things going on in our lives besides surfing. Surfing was something we did that pulled us together and set us apart, Robin said. Robin's brother, surf legend Ricky Grigg, summed up the significance. When the idea of Gidget came along, Grigg observed, the writer, of course, picked his daughter. You can't blame him for that. But the idea of it was the young girl at Malibu. That could have been Robin or Vickie or Aggie. In fact, it was all three of them. Les Williams would go on to become a founder of the San Onofre Surf Club, compete in countless contests, and even grace the cover of the Beach Boys' first album, Surfin' USA. Joe Quigg and Matt Kivlin would become historic Malibu shaping icons. Darrylin, Aggie, Claire, Robin, and Vickie would be nearly lost in the mist of time. Like many 50s surfers, they were overshadowed as the Gidget boom produced a whole new cast of modern surfers. In the faded photographs of surf lore, it would be easy to overlook one thing. Women had been the catalyst for the shortboard revolution. As Jeff Duclos, who wrote the definitive story Women of Malibu for Longboard magazine, told me, these women on surfboards designed by Joe Quigg and Matt Kivlin started the evolution of high-performance surfing. But it was not just about design innovation. This was a whole new set of options for lifestyle independence. They may not be recognized as pioneers today, Ricky Grigg concluded, because all the attention is on what's going on at the moment. But when you think back, they were the ones. Good ride, Norma Jean. Marilyn Monroe as part of the 40s surf scene. A local Los Angeles girl in post-World War II years, Norma Jean Baker loved the beach, particularly Malibu. She dated Tom Zahn, an aspiring actor and top surfer of the 40s. And although she rode waves with him and enjoyed the surfing lifestyle, she was primarily focused on modeling and acting. In 1947, some show business friends who lived in the Malibu beach colony gave the young model her stage name Marilyn Monroe. Images from some of her first modeling shoots show her posing on the cliffs above Malibu Point. Beach parties at Malibu included film stars Gary Cooper, Peter Lawford, and starlet Darrylin Zanuck, along with the era's surfing superstars Pete Peterson, Whitey Harrison, Dave Rocklin, and Tommy Zahn. Along with Monroe, Zahn was also dating Darrylin Zanuck, the daughter of 20th Century Fox movie mogul Darryl Zanuck. For career advancement, Zahn knew Zanuck was a better bet than Monroe, and the relationship with Marilyn slipped away. But he remembered Monroe from her days surfing with him at Malibu. She was in prime condition, tremendously fit. I used to take her surfing up at Malibu, tandem surfing, two riders on the same surfboard, recalled Zahn. I'd take her later in the dead of winter when it was cold, and it didn't faze her in the least. She'd lay in the cold water, waiting for the waves. Marilyn was very good in the water, very robust, so healthy, a really fine attitude toward life. I was 22 when I met her, and I guess she was 20. Gosh, I really liked her. When Zahn asked Joe Quigg to make a novice girls board for Darrylin Zanuck, his new surfing girlfriend, Quigg produced a board now known as the Darrylin board. The design is now seen as the transitional concept that bridged big and heavy to light and fast. Had a romantic tussle gone slightly differently, that board might have been the Marilyn board, and Marilyn Monroe would have been a goddess of surf as well as film. The Calhoun dynasty, Marge, Robin, and Candy, were the icons of the 50s and 60s. Marge Calhoun took up the mantle of the Malibu women like a fire takes up the oxygen in a room. It is hard to overestimate the impact Calhoun had on women surfers. A towering figure of independence, strength, and talent, Marge was the first woman in the surf culture who did it all, Rel's son told me in 1985. She could be married but have her own career, raise fabulous daughters but remain athletically competitive. She could socialize with men from all walks of life and still be respected and adored. Marge showed women how many things they could be by being so many things, explains Terry Esselin, who knew Calhoun and was a good friend for many years. Marge worked as a stunt double for Esther Williams, worked with Roy Rogers on TV. She co-founded the first surfing association, became a contest judge, Esselin continued. She rode huge waves and won the Makaha International, which was then considered the World Championships. She was the first lady of surfing in the 50s. Born in Hollywood in 1926, Marge Booth learned to swim at the Deauville Beach Club next to the Santa Monica Pier. She took to the ocean almost immediately, but surfing was a long way off. In 1942, Marge married Tom Calhoun. Returning to post-war Los Angeles, Calhoun's water skills found a place in Hollywood. Her charisma became apparent almost immediately. Frank Capra came to my house in Santa Monica Canyon looking for me, Calhoun said of the revered film director, producer, and writer who became the creative force behind some of the major award-winning films of the 30s and 40s. He wanted me for a Frank Sinatra movie called Hole in the Head. Calhoun began surfing at the late age of 31 when her husband Tom had legendary Malibu shaper Joe Quigg make Calhoun a 10-foot, 27-pound custom balsa board in 1955. When she caught her first wave at Malibu, she realized her destiny. Surfing is an exciting, challenging sport with a minimum amount of equipment required. You only need a board, a bathing suit, and a piece of wax. Nature provides everything else. Learning to ride that board at the Malibu colony, she became friends with Darrylin Zanuck. Calhoun was tutored by Darrylin, along with some of Santa Monica's greatest watermen, including Peter Cole, Ricky Grigg, and Buzzy Trent. In Hawaii, she toured around with friend Eve Fletcher and, on a lark, entered the women's division of the 1958 Makaha International Surfing Championships. She won. Marge Calhoun's two daughters, Robin and Candy, were the media darlings of the newly emerging surf magazine industry. Photos of the tall, beautiful, athletic women with sun-streaked hair graced every publication for years. They shared waves with the best riders of the day and left an indelible impression. They were America's surfing sweethearts, noted Surfing Illustrated publisher and Hang Ten originator Duke Boyd in his 2012 book, Legends of Surfing. They epitomized the spirit of surfing and brought a sense of legitimacy to a sport that was suffering from a mischievous beach bum reputation. Candy was also a top body surfer, the first woman to be pictured body surfing both the Newport Wedge and Hawaii's Banzai Pipeline. Through the 50s and into the 60s, the Calhouns were the mother-daughter model of good surfing, good health, and good fun. When the girls were grown, Calhoun continued to surf and promote the sport she loved. She became an active contest judge and co-founder of the U.S. Surfing Association. Calhoun retired from surfing and moved to the Central Coast in the 80s. In 2003, she was inducted into the Huntington Beach Surfing Hall of Fame as the Woman of the Year. She passed away in 2017 at the age of 93. Her influence was immeasurable to the generation of wave riders who came after her. The Disappearing Act. On a hot summer day in the late 50s, a young Eve Fletcher drove her British racing green Austin Haley to legendary surfer Marge Calhoun's house in Santa Monica. Loading their boards into Calhoun's van, they took off for the beach, leaving Calhoun's husband Tom and a group of surfing's merriest pranksters to commit mischief. In an era when practical jokes were a deep part of the surfing culture, the caper this group played on the unsuspecting women was elaborate even for their talents. Removing the molding and then the large picture glass front window of the Calhoun's house, they propped a 2-inch by 8-inch timber into the opening and slowly drove Eve's sports car onto the boards up into the gaping hole and carefully into the home's living room. Replacing the window and molding, the crew cleaned up and waited for the girl's return. Arriving at the driveway, seeing her car was missing, Fletcher panicked. "It's gone," she sobbed. "It's been stolen." Racing to the kitchen phone to report a car theft, a distraught Fletcher and Marge were met by the jokers who quickly ushered them into the living room. "There's my car," Fletcher yelled in relief. Then, realizing the prank was on her, Fletcher paused. Calmly turning to Marge Calhoun, with no hint of irony, she remarked, "It looks really good next to your red leather chair." One of the first women to come to Hawaii in the 50s, one of the first to join the storied San Onofre Surfing Club, Eve Fletcher saw the modern era of surfing from wooden boards to jet skis. Radiant and unflappable, she had the looks of movie star Grace Kelly and the insouciance of feminist Gloria Steinem. Born on the East Coast, Fletcher moved with her family to the San Fernando Valley at age 10, becoming an avid swimmer when her parents joined the local country club. After college, Disney's Imagineering department hired her as an animation supervisor, where she contributed to Cinderella, Alice in Wonderland, and other Disney films. Fletcher met actor Johnny Sheffield, who played Boy in several Tarzan films, who introduced her to surfing at San Onofre. Lured by surfing's thrills, she became a San Onofre Surfing Club member back when the membership was as exclusive as a back entrance key to Disneyland. Notorious for wearing a knitted white wool cardigan in the dead of winter in lieu of a wetsuit, Fletcher's grace on the beach and enthusiasm in the water made her a fond fixture for more than one generation of wave riders. Fletcher continued at Disney through 1989, working on The Little Mermaid before receiving the Animation Guild's Golden Award in 2005. Featured in the documentary Surfing for Life, Fletcher was 75 and still surfing almost daily. "I want to keep surfing as long as I can," Fletcher told me at a California Surf Museum exhibit opening in 2014. "You're never too old to be stoked." Eve Fletcher's memorial was held November 12, 2020, on her 93rd birthday. "No one had more enthusiasm than Eve," recalled Don Craig, a former president of the San Onofre Surf Club, at her memorial where her ashes were scattered at sea off Dana Point. She lived the surfing life. Groundswells and undercurrents. The expansion of America's post-World War II prosperity launched surfing's modern age. As adventurous Americans explored the new leisure society, the beach became a focal point. Surfing's small coastal enclaves in California and Hawaii were seen as youthful pockets of exotic activity, but too offbeat for acceptance in the mainstream's social conformity. Fed by the newly burgeoning media of television and the proliferation of women's magazines, the 50s more often than not rewarded the embrace of traditional gender roles, where women's identities as wives and mothers were still expected to give the appearance of acquiescence. But beneath the platitudes of television shows like Father Knows Best and Leave It to Beaver, the decade saw a smoldering discontent with the status quo, particularly among young people. Below the surface was a powerful groundswell, not just a wave, but a set of waves. Rock and roll radio waves, a tide of new technology, undercurrents of the sexual revolution, and the long simmering surge of the civil rights movement. The biggest wave would be the baby boomers themselves, the largest generation of Americans ever. It would soon roll on to the continental shelf of American society like a tsunami, crashing headlong into the shallow reefs of hypocrisy and walls of bigotry. Marge Calhoun, Vickie Flaxman, Robin Grigg, and the other surfers of their day were creating a lifestyle based on non-conventional roles and a disregard for restrictive traditions. Asked how she got the courage to seize that independence, Calhoun responded, "If you look out there and think, gee, I wish I could go out there, just do it. If you ever have the desire for anything, do it." The women of Malibu were an early signal that Marge Calhoun was the future, and she lived by this credo. Calhoun was an inspiration to women surfers, but the desire for increased independence bubbled everywhere. As the incomparable R&B singer Etta James' 1959 signature song would say, "At last." As the coastlines became beachheads, surfing symbolized free expression. Women would join the ranks of the freedom riders on real waves of change. Well, that is going to do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Chapter 6 really gives you a glimpse into the moment when surfing was changing fast and reminds us the presence of women in the water never disappeared. It just kept evolving, often quietly, but always powerful. And as we're reading this book in honor of Women's History Month, it feels especially important to slow down and recognize these stories, the ones that didn't always make the headlines, but helped shape the culture in a big way. Surfers like Darrylin Zanuck, Kohner, Robin Grigg, Aggie Bane, Vickie Flaxman, Cassidy, the Calhouns, and Eve Fletcher. Athletes, waterwomen, and pioneers who kept showing up and carving out space in the lineup and changing the direction of surfing in the process. It's a reminder that the history of surfing isn't a straight line. It's layered, it's complex, and it's shaped by people whose stories don't always get told as often as they should. And that's what the authors of these books and this podcast are here to do. Bring those stories back into the lineup where they belong. I hope you join us again for our next episode as we move forward in this book. We'll continue uncovering the stories of the queens, pioneers, rebels, competitors, and champions that must not be forgotten. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot if you shared the podcast with a friend who loves surfing, surf culture, or just a good story from the past. If you'd like to help support the podcast, you can visit buymeacoffee.com/The Surfer's Library. Your support helps cover the platform fees that keeps the show going each month. Also, if you'd like to sponsor the podcast or have any story ideas or feedback for us, please contact us on Instagram or at thesurferslibrary@gmail.com. And with all that said, thanks for tuning in, and until next time, keep your toes on the nose, your stoke high, and always, always, always support your local surf shop. I'll see you out in the lineup. Jim Kempton is a pioneering figure in the surf and action sports world. An author, editor, screenwriter, and historian whose work has appeared in leading surf publications, as well as major outlets like the New York Times and Time. He currently serves as executive director of the California Surf Museum and previously held top roles including editor and publisher of Surfer Magazine, group publisher at Transworld Publishing, and media director for Billabong. Earlier in his career, he worked at Surfboards Hawaii in Encinitas and traveled extensively during the 1970s era of surf exploration, helping introduce surfing to Europe and launching the influential Global Surf Report, which later became part of Surfer Magazine. An award-winning screenwriter and author, Kempton wrote Big Wave Guardians and The Shape of Things, the Dick Brewer story, both recognized at multiple film festivals, along with other surf-focused projects. He has authored 4 books, including Women on Waves, a history of women surfing that won the Southern California Book Festival Award for nonfiction, as well as First We Surf, Then We Eat, Surfing, the Manual, and the San Onofre Surfing Club. Born on Guam and raised in the South Pacific, he has surfed or lived in more than 30 countries and holds an MBA in International Business and a BA in Journalism, studying in England, Hawaii, and San Diego.